afternoon. Welcome to the Weekly Livestock Market Update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Meghan with us as always to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
Happy Arctic last Friday. It is awfully chilly here. Is your weather, I know you've been cold too, but are you at least a little better at this point?
So we are better today, tomorrow, and then we dive deep into the deep freeze, I think, on Sunday.
Just in time for my return to Missouri.
Exactly.
It's really kind of a slow week for us. We're going to talk cold storage numbers, and then we're going to preview next week's cattle inventory report, which comes out on Tuesday. But to kick things off, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yeah, if we start on the cattle side this week, cash-fed cattle were $1.20 lower this week. Those feeder cattle markets were anywhere from steady to $2 lower this week. On the future side, the February live cattle futures contract was up 25 cents, and the March feeder cattle contract was up $2.65. We lost again on the choice box beef price. It's $4.95 lower this week. That's actually more than $21.50 below where it was a year ago at this time, Megan. And you look at ribs being down pretty hard this week, kind of led the way with that lower box beef price. On the hog side, cash barrels and gilts were virtually unchanged this week. The February lean hog futures contract was down $2 on the week. The pork cutout value gained 80 cents. Hams and butts really led the way in strength in that pork cutout value.
We talk a lot about what's going on in terms of box beef prices or in terms of pork cutout values and how that relates. Are we getting to a point where we're getting a little nervous with this slide that we have continued to see on the box beef side of things?
Yes, in both, frankly. I mean, you look at the pork cutout value, it's $15.50 below where it was a year ago at this time. So on both sides, maybe we're getting a little bit of drag starting to happen on the demand side of the equation. And on the cattle side, might knock a little bit of the shine off of what you and I talk about as so much higher cattle prices. We'll see what we get out of the report next week. But just because we have weaker supplies, if we also have weaker demand, that certainly reduces the optimism in higher cattle prices.
All right, let's talk weekly slaughter numbers. How are things going so far? And are we starting to see, have we seen any impact weather-wise in terms of what's going on with slaughter?
Oh, so maybe a little bit. We're still pretty early, but when you look at what USDA says for the week ending January 28th, a run of 659,000 head of cattle this week. That's up 13,000 head from a week ago, and 4,000 head above a year ago. And just a little precursor, although I don't like to talk about year to date yet, we're right on track with what we slaughtered cattle-wise last year. That won't continue as we go further into 2022. On the hog side, a run of 2.536 million head is what USDA is reporting. That's also 5,000 head above a week ago and 6,000 head above a year ago. And I'll remind us that we started slower in terms of pork or hog slaughter last year. This year, we're 2.2% above year to date. That also, I believe, will change as we look forward.
It is. I am interested to see what those numbers look like in about June.
That's right. We'll have a long enough stretch here that we can get a little more confident about the direction that we're going for the year. That is true.
All right. Cold storage is a big report that came out this week. And the only thing I'm going to say before I let you spill the beans on the numbers is my bacon prices at the grocery store better start reflecting what we're seeing in terms of cold storage.
We'll see what we can do to help you on the bacon price front. I saw one of my local stores ran a $1.99 special for one day, limit 2. So it tells you at least some specials out there. All right, so beef ending stocks for the end of 2022 were 544 million pounds. That was up 7.3% relative to a year ago. Also up 13.3% relative to the end of 2019, so before COVID, just to give us a little bit of perspective here of more beef stocks in freezers as we've gone further into 2022 relative to history. On the pork side, 458.1 million pounds of pork in freezers at the end of 2022. That was 15.6% above the 2021 level, but 21.1% below where we were in 2019. So a little different story, I think, when we talk about the pork side. And for your beloved bellies, we had 63.1 million pounds of bellies in freezers. That was merely 65.6% above 2021 levels, but 5.4% below where we were in 2019. So that break-in bacon prices that you want, I might remind you that 2021 was awful tight, and 2022 is really just starting to get us back to more normal levels of inventory.
That's been kind of the conversation we've been having on our side of things in the background between John and myself about what's been going on cold storage wise. We saw obviously a large drawdown in stocks over the course of some time. We're just kind of maybe moving that swinging back into more normalcy. But do we get concerned? I don't want to say concerned, but are we watching to see where these stocks go, especially as we're watching and correlating it with demand?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to say is we're back to kind of the levels we would have had pre-COVID. And so now if we keep growing from here, we get more concerned. Let's take chicken here for just a minute. You and I don't talk chicken all that often, but 931.8 million pounds of chicken at the end of 2022. That was up 25.4% relative to 2021, and relative to 2019 is down 4.7%. So when you look at across all of the major meat categories, we're having this situation where we're back to pre-COVID in terms of those levels. So yes, now we want to watch really carefully. You and I talked about a lot of building going on in 2022. That building was back just to more normal levels. So where do we go from here? That's the question.
And then my other question is, we pulled all of these animals, all of this beef, for example, forward, right? Does it back off? Do we watch to see what happens in those beef stocks? Like, are we backing off? Are we not building? And how does that play into the bigger supply conversation moving forward?
Yeah, I think you correctly identify, Megan. By the time we get out there mid-year, we'll struggle to have the same number of beef stocks as we went through 2021 with. As slaughter and production slows, we'll definitely, I think, pull some out of freezers. So I don't see that continuing to grow. Pork side could be a different story. Chicken side could also be that same pork story of more supplies as we look ahead.
All right. As we look ahead to next week, we don't always do pre-report previews or a look ahead. What are we expecting? Cattle inventory numbers come out on Tuesday. It's kind of the biggie for the month in terms of USDA reports. As you look ahead, talk to me about pre-report expectations and what you're looking for in Tuesday's numbers.
Yeah, so the thing I know is certainly is we'll have fewer beef cows. I'm sure that's helpful for everyone in the discussion. All right, so a more serious side of this, to me, the question really comes: Are we above or below 29 million head when we look at beef cow inventory? There's a lot of folks out there who are suggesting we'll be below 29. Kind of sitting there right on the cusp of 29 in my own thoughts, but that is down significantly. The pre-report estimates that I've seen so far would suggest we're down a little more than 4% in terms of beef cow inventory. I think there's a lot of discussion about USDA probably revising down the 2021 calf crop, just given what we did on the heifer side and as well beef cow slaughter, probably ended up with a smaller calf crop than USDA would have estimated back in the early part of last year. So I think we're going to get some revisions down in numbers. And you talk about USDA giving us a surprise with something in beef cow inventory in the low 28s. I think that'll get market's attention for sure, and could happen. I don't want to suggest it can't happen. So we're going to talk about much shorter supplies. We're going to get a much better handle on what kind of contraction are we really talking about in terms of beef production as we get in the latter half of 2023.
I think the other interesting element of that in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things, is if there are less numbers, right, that would be more positive to markets potentially moving forward. And if the weather component comes in, how does the whole beef production set up? Because we're not going to be we've been putting so many heifers on feed. So there's just so many dominoes that we're going to be watching that come from this report on Tuesday.
Yeah, so for sure. I think you're right to remind me to say, we might come January 1 of 2024 and be down even hard again. We don't really know what plays out weather-wise. So this isn't probably the bottom of beef cow inventory is what I'll say today. Weather is going to play the big role, I think, in that. So we have a ways to go, and I've been trying to say I'm not sure one wants to look back at the cyclical growth that we would have seen in cow inventory back in 2015, 2016, 2017, and think we repeat that this time through. I think it's slower growth ahead, so weaker supplies for a longer period of time. I don't always like record prices or near record prices because of less supplies, but for those that are going to be selling cattle, it could still be a great opportunity. Again, we'll see where demand goes as we look ahead the next couple of years.
And then you think about obviously the weather is this just unknown, and it will ebb and flow throughout the year, right? But the amount of snow that has fallen in some of the areas that have needed it and need it desperately is incredible. Now it's just got to absorb, right? It's to make it in there and make a difference.
And I would encourage everyone to be looking at the subsoil moisture right now as they think about where we sit, which is still relatively at the low end of historical norms, despite we're getting some good precipitation in some parts of the country here over the winter. It's frankly what happens next spring and summer that'll be most important to us. And I think in almost all cases, we'll need timely rains through the summer to make sure we have adequate grass.
Scott, it's always great to see you. That isn't the only report we have next week. There's a couple others that come out as well.
That's right. We get Restaurant Performance Index next week and finish next week with a jobs report.
Sounds great. We will talk to you then.
Sounds good, Megan.
To receive our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there. And if you're watching us live on Facebook, you can add those questions and comments in there as well. And if you want to see what happens every day in the commodity markets, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.